Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Um, so, hold on. I'm not gonna sneeze. No. Okay, I'm on partial shadow ban. It's hard to find my videos. You can never find the first three. If you want to find all my videos, go to vincentbrunoshadowban.blogspot.com. It's at the bottom of the screen and it's in the description box. The title of this is Jehovah's Witnesses and Judeo-Freemasonry. If you want to learn more about Jehovah's Witnesses and Judeo-Freemasonry, go to bewisestserpents.blogspot.com. If you are an ex-Jehovah's Witness or just anyone with any comments or questions on this topic or any information to share, you can find me at vincent.bruno.1229@gmail.com. It's at the bottom of the screen and in the description box. And in case I forgot to say it, bewisestserpents.blogspot.com is also at the bottom of the screen and in the description box. Okay, so we finished the Watchtower and the Masons, and now we're reading Charles Taze Russell, an early American Zionist by David Horowitz. That's what we're reading now, and we're going to watch something called Exposing Watchtower Secrets, Freemasons. So let's start reading. Introduction. For some 15 years, the United Israel Bulletin, established in 1944 as the official publication of the United Israel World Union, proclaiming Mosaic law for one world and stressing the biblical prophecies relating to the return of the children of Israel to their ancient home, was published a series of articles dealing with prophecies propounded by the late pastor Charles Taze Russell, pointing to the destiny of the Jewish people. Okay, I just want to write that down. It's what? Proclaiming Mosaic law. That sounds like Noahide. United Israel Bulletin, United Israel World Union. I just wanted to write that in. Okay. Having preceded the founder of modern Zionism, Theodor Herzl, in his espousal of the descendants of the Hebrew prophets, Russell stood at the turn of the century as one of the very first American Christian Bible scholars to predict the return of Israel to their homeland. After traveling around the world and following a visit to the then very much neglected Palestine, he returned to the United States and accepted an invitation from some of New York's outstanding Jewish leaders to address a mass meeting at the Hippodrome on October 9th, 1910. The occasion proved historic. Excerpts of the speech are contained in this volume. The seeds Pastor Russell had sown bore good fruit. His writings and works have been widely published, and to this day, tens of thousands of loyal devotees are to be found around the world, especially in the United States. Among these devotees was the late John Hopeful, who directed the Epiphany Bible Students Association at Mount Dora, Florida. Having lived a long and fruitful life, Pilgrim Hoffel was gathered unto his father in April 1984 at the age of 89. This writer enjoyed a close and friendly contact with the Hoffel family and has continued keeping in touch with his devoted widow, Emily. For years, she had been following the Pastor Russell, appearing in the United Israel Bulletin, and have hundreds of others loyal students of the renowned pastor. Mr. Hoffel, in discussion with the writer, expressed the need in these critical days facing mankind for making some move to bring into the light of day the historic life and works of the noted Bible scholar who was such an ardent Zionist. As a beginning, it was agreed that a book would be published to incorporate the basic Russell articles that have appeared in the United Israel Bulletin, and that the volume would be dedicated to her husband, John J. Hoffel, one of the pastor's most loyal champions. This writer is the editor of the United Israel Bulletin, a publication basically Jewish, Hebraic in nature, and stressing the universality of the Hebrew Bible, which calls blueprint of life, as recounting prophetically the history and future of the children of Israel and all their 12 tribes, as well as the destiny of all nations. Pastor Russell's clear insight into the prophecies of Bible concerning the resurrection of Israel and the Holy Land have intrigued and interested this writer. It was therefore decided to publish these prophecies of Russell in action, resulting in hundreds of contacts with his devotees around the world. As a devout Christian Bible scholar, Pastor Russell, in his many writings, delved into a number of varied themes relating to the redemption of mankind is connected to messianism, but he saw the Jew as God's prime piece, the creator barometer foretelling events, and it was the continuous stress in Israel and its return to the land of ancestors, which was of primary interest to everyone in the bulletin staff. It was basically this aspect of his prophetic writings which impelled the publication of this volume. This writer, as an investigative reporter, has devoted many decades to the study of the Bible, including 5 expositions as an answer to the Tom Paine's Age of Reason, proving that to date not a single translation has rendered the original accurately. Pastor Russell undertook a similar investigation. His conclusions: all the creeds of Christendom claim to be found on the Bible, and these are conflicting. It is possible that the Bible has been misrepresented, he asked. He soon found out through a systematic and dedicated study to which he had devoted his life that the scriptures had been grievously perverted. In this outlook, he was not entirely alone. The great Russian writer Count Leo Tolstoy, while a firm Christian believer in God, became deeply disappointed in organized institutions. Said he, I saw the order of the church, her teachers' work, and hermits prove the murder of young youth. I turned my attention to what I was done by men who professed Christianity, and I was horrified. I am afraid to believe the lie that surrounds us and to lose God that is possible, but it is quite clear that it is not the truth, that I was mistaken in thinking I could find an answer and solution of my doubts in the church. I had extended to go to God and found my way into a stinking bog, which evolves in me only those feelings of which I was afraid: disgusted, malice, and indignation. As regards the Jewish people and the biblical prophecies relating to Israel, despite contrary and negative positions taken by other so-called Bible scholars among his colleagues, Pastor Russell remained steadfast and adamant. In his espousal of Israel, he stood particularly alone, and the readers of the global movement of which he served as president betrayed him by deviating from the position he had taken on the Jewish people. Pastor Russell, in all his writings, proved that the theme of the whole Bible revolves around the return of the children of Israel to the ancient homeland, the Holy Land, with Jerusalem as the capital. There's no escaping these prophecies as contained in Isaiah, Joel, Zechariah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Amos, and others. Even the simple, inaccurate translations present such a picture. However, as we look into the life and writings of Pastor Russell, it is important to note that the language of the Hebrew Bible implies a genius of grammar without parallel in the history of the world literature. This writer, carefully studying the Hebraic script in the cryptic compositions of passages, has discovered that their peculiar grammatical construction is built around deliberate styles which alone link all the books of Hebrew Bible into an inseparable unit. This peculiarity is not evident in any translation, hence the necessity of knowledge not only of biblical Hebrew, but also of code inherent therein in the varied styles employed. The moment the student who knows Hebrew and is aware of the code takes leave of the Hebrew Bible and enters into the Greco-Roman works as well as commentaries, he or she comes upon strange and foreign ground. The connections fail, the seemingly chaotic style disappears, the code evident throughout all the books of the Hebrew Bible vanishes. It is precisely this code that has protected the unadulterated truths of the original and thus distinguished the genuine from the imitation. Better still, the code unmistakably identifies the Creator's handiwork. The code evident in all the chapters comprising the Hebrew Bible involves not only a number of white spaces separating sections with the chapters, some of which spaces contain the letter samach, denoted sealed, but also consistency marking the characteristic of the Hebrew writer. This consistency evoking the greatest awe and wonder in the scholar hand to do with their deliberate employment of specific styles and idioms throughout as a recurrent theme, which seems to have taken on the aspect of password or identity mark for the true prophet, and which links them in common endeavor while at the same time keeping outsiders and pseudo-prophets in their place. Another marvel involving the prophet's use of the code is this: they deliberately spoke and wrote in seemingly chaotic styles and expressions, and yet paradoxically it was in this confusion of language that their consistency lay. While the outsiders While to outsiders they appear to be individuals who made innumerable grammatical mistakes, in truth they were literary geniuses of unparalleled greatness. For in writing or speaking about an event, they not only wrote about the current events as such, but infused into the hieroglyphic-like Hebrew tongue a number of cryptic meanings, which, while indirectly linked with the events, had a bearing either to the past or the future, and even to both. The interrelationship was there. In simple words, while addressing themselves in speech or writing to one current happening, their divinely inspired and motivated minds saw the source of the happening and how it would manifest itself in the future and record it accordingly to their prophetic writings. For example, they saw Israel's two main ancient enemies, Babylon and Assyria, reappearing in modern militaristic garb at the end of days, retaining their spirit of enmity against the people of the book envisioned in their ancient homeland. In Joel, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, and especially in Zechariah 14 and Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 onward, they present the future of the world with a view of the final struggle eventuating in world peace. Pastor Russell, in his intensive study of the Bible, was fully aware of the fact that the Bible was written in code and that someday the seal would be broken and the full truth unveiled. The Hebrew Bible, to the translation-nourished reader, may appear a philological enigma, which in reality it is. Indeed, few will deny that the translation of a foreign language rarely does justice to the original, and this is particularly true with respect to the following Hebrew of the Bible. No work has ever troubled a philologist so much as the Hebrew Bible. Despite endless investigations, the sifting and dissections engaged in by ablest scholars of all lands, the rich collection of works incorporating the Torah, the prophets, and the writings known under the acronym Tanakh remain a sealed book. Contradictory translations and interpretations have only added to the confusion, and even those who were familiar with the Hebrew also erred, since they refused to reconcile the plain and sometimes shocking points inherent in some passages with these portions which were accepted and which fitted the traditional dogmatic view. The translators, being unwilling to accept because of their rooted beliefs a meaning actually conveyed by the original text, took the liberty of perverting the intended sense by either adding or diminishing from the text. The Bible contains thousands of passages which have been so twisted by the translators. Okay. All right, let's start watching the show.
The Apostate and His Wife. I'm the Apostate. I'm Vern.
And I'm his wife. I'm Shauna. Thanks for joining us today. It's pretty cold outside here today, about minus 20, minus 30 with wind chill. That's Celsius, so somewhere between minus 4 and minus 22 Fahrenheit. So it's too cold to be outside, pretty windy. We've decided to heat ourselves up by digging into some more of that hot Rutherford history.
We got a lot of good comments on the gold mine.
For sure. And a lot of curiosity about the information, where he's getting that from.
So when I was doing my research, I was looking for Russell and his divorce. And up came this article, and I'll give you the website. It's called jwdivorces.bravehost.com. And there's just books and books and books of information on there. It looks to me, and then I went to look who did all this. And it's kind of anonymous. I'm not sure. I'm not the best at finding stuff, but it's I think it's done by lawyers.
Well, there's definitely somebody with a legal passion and also the knowledge to dig through these old documents.
Well, someone had the license to pull up legal archives, because we were reading transcripts.
A lot of this is public domain.
Huh?
It sits there. You just have to know where to look, right?
Interesting.
Like in all of these archives were pre-computerized records.
Yeah.
That's the issue. So You literally have to go to these old facilities or wherever these files are kept and dig into them. So
Well, this document's a new document because it always references 2021 when it does the comparison in the money value.
to the dollar,
Yeah. So this is only a year old.
Yeah.
This is some new stuff,
Well,
like
it was-
new old stuff, I guess.
Somebody put a lot of time and energy into this, and we thank them for it because wow, to see it all compiled together sure really gives you an overview.
So whoever's out there, thank you very much. I did write you a note. Haven't heard back, but thank you. And we will do our best to get this out. And I think that was the intent, to get this out to the people.
Yeah. One other thing, we'll be sure to put the link for this website in the description below the podcast video here, so you can check it out there too.
Yeah, there's no secrets.
No.
Now, yeah, I was going to talk about some scriptures, but as I was going through this Rutherford and Russell stuff, especially we started uncovering Russell, it was kind of like a new level of an awakening for me. It just gave me a whole different look, because when I was in the organization about 1996, they made me a ministerial servant, and I used to have to go up on the platform and do 15-minute parts from the Proclaimer's book on these two guys, Rutherford and Russell. Because none of the elders wanted that part, because it was old history. I wasn't really interested in it back then. I'm not a history buff at all, but this stuff, for some reason, being on this side of the fence, is fascinating on how we all get sucked in.
This glimpse into the whole JW world is absolutely fascinating. I mean, it's
Now, it's helped me to see the scriptures differently. And you notice, as we've done this channel, and this is real time, as we're putting out videos for you guys out there, this is real time where we've been waking up. I've been waking up, and we've been putting out videos just about daily. There's hundreds of videos.
Well, it's amazing what you realize in a day,
Yeah. So it's kind of a track record, but now it's the level of waking up now after looking at this deep history is just really wakes you up, like really solid. I think this is the best thing to share with people.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, the other thing, I see the scriptures differently, and the other thing that's kind of weird in this whole process of waking up, and I'm going to mention it, but information has been coming to us at the right time. I don't want to sound biblical, but if I was looking at this at the beginning, it would have been too much. I would have quit.
You wouldn't have been ready.
But somehow this information got into our hands at the right time.
If you think about it, Vern, it was like 7 months ago when I said, what is the big deal about being apostate? Look at the definition of the word. And the look that he gave me, folks, was just like, it was like I had him in the crosshairs because I didn't understand how dirty of a word, like how that word has been twisted within the JW organization. Everybody is apostate to something. I'm an apostate Roman Catholic.
Well, the JWs are mostly Roman Catholic.
Well, a lot of those all of those JW converts are apostates because they are now apostate to the religion that they no longer believe in.
Well, I was new to this religion.
This whole sentiment of apostate being against God, that's crap. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to look at the Bible here. And we weren't going to really use this channel as a Bible discussion channel too much, but it's more of a history, looking into the history. But I wanted to look at this one scripture, Matthew 7:24-27. And this is kind of how I see all the apostates out there helping. So it says, everyone, this is Jesus speaking. He says, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does them, and does not do them, will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it.
So where we live, people, we're a couple hours from the Rocky Mountains. And I don't know if you've ever seen them. They are majestic, towering peaks. You can go on hikes there. and follow these deep ravines and fantastic canyons that have been carved out by water. What starts with a little stream, like a few people getting together and sharing their opinion. Eventually, when you add enough drips, it turns into a raging torrent that can carve out rock or carve out the tower.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's what's happening today. All
Oh,
the
yeah.
apostates out there, like this person that built this website,
Mhm.
or peoples
Mhm.
that put this together, all of us together are like these little streams,
Mhm.
and we all join together all the apostate channels. And it doesn't matter. We have different ideas, different beliefs. Some don't believe in the scriptures, some do.
Mhm.
And it doesn't really matter. But the one purpose is we're all taking down the tower
Mhm.
because it's built on lies.
Oh, yeah. You add enough water and eventually you're going to have a wave, and the tower can't withstand that. So well done.
So this other scripture I thought was interesting, and sometimes these just show up. Isaiah 43:2. I was putting in water, right? It says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. And when you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flames shall not consume you." So I think about us apostates out there. We're doing a good work, and we're passing through these waters. And I think by the material coming to us at the right time, I think that's just really God's spirit being with us. And why do I say that?
Let's go.
Why do I say that? Well, because the apostates are going through fires or going through waters, and God used waters to destroy before. So we're like waters.
Waters are cleansing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's going to cleanse the tower. That's what it's doing. Anyways, we're getting off topic. Today we're talking about the coop.
The coup.
The coup.
Not our coops.
It's spelled coop.
Yes, but that's a silent P, dear.
It's a good thing you're on this channel.
It's a good thing that I know French. Eh? Anyways,
Sorry.
it's a coup.
Okay, the coup begins. Get your opponents relaxed and out of town.
Mm.
The Brooklyn Daily Eagle, November 26, 1916. All Pastor Russell's activities continue. Reigns to A.I. Ritchie. Remember, we talked about him.
He was the vice president of the society at the time.
Yeah, latter will probably be elected president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society.
Mhm.
10,000 members can vote on it. Meeting to be held in Pittsburgh in January, and pastors will not. What? Filed?
Yeah, the will wasn't filed yet.
Oh,
Remember,
pastors will.
Joseph, right?
Yeah,
Joseph
Brother
Russell hadn't even been dead for 30 days yet.
Charles Taze Russell.
Yes, Russell.
Yes.
Sorry, pardon me. Charles Russell hasn't been passed for 30 days yet.
So now, how did Rutherford get the seat when A.I. Ritchie was in line
Well,
for it?
there was still an election.
Yeah, so let's read that. It's going to talk about it here. It says that A.I. Ritchie, vice president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, will be the next president. Directing force of Pastor Russell's religious enterprises is the belief expressed by certain persons high up in the councils of Russellism. It is also hinted that the will of the late pastor will possibly convey some suggestion as to whom he would wish to succeed him. The will has not yet been filed for probate, but it is stated that the document will express a number of the late Mr. Russell's wishes and suggestions as to how he would prefer to have some branches of the work conducted. Pastor Russell did not desire that his will be filed until some time after his death. He died October 31st.
So to me, that means there was maybe something salacious in there.
Mm-hmm. One of the provisions of the will, according to the authoritative information, calls, you know what I think it was?
What?
I think he had to give Rutherford time to sink all the assets into the Watchtower so his wife couldn't get anything. His whole life was about keeping his wife penniless.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's my theory. Let's read. One provision of the will, according to the authoritative information, calls for the appointment of an editorial staff to carry on the publication of the Watchtower, one of Russell's papers. It is understood that the pastor named person whom he wishes to serve in this capacity. It is said that the pastor has left enough unpublished matter from his own pen to fill a body of the Watchtower for several years to come.
That was mentioned before too. Yeah.
According to a statement made yesterday by A.H. Macmillan, of Columbia Heights, who was a personal assistant. So that's where that A.H. McMillan, he was a personal assistant to Pastor Russell. The death of the leader will not halt or retard the activity of the organization in the slightest degree. And here's what he says. In fact, he said, we are receiving hundreds of letters and telegrams every day from contributors stating that they have absolute confidence in the officers of the organization. Many of them say they are going to continue their donations, and others express an interest of increasing the amounts they have been giving. So it's funny how people get sucked into these guys, these cults, way back then. They're just wanting it to continue. Well, in reverence to the prospective new president, Mr. McMillan stated that he had no means of knowing who would be chosen. He explained that every person who contributes to the work is entitled to vote for each $10 given. What?
So they could buy a vote.
Really? So it's about money.
And it was, so if you think about that, it was $10 per person. Wow,
That's
that's a lot of money at that time.
Well, I think it says it
Pardon
here.
me.
There are no upwards of 10,000 persons in the United States.
There are upwards
of 10,000 persons in the U.S.
Yes.
who are eligible votes under this provision, and they will assemble, or such proportion of them as desired to do so, at Pittsburgh during the first week of January and vote for a president. Notices of election are now being mailed to the 100,000 shareholders, so-called.
So just do some quick math here. 10,000 votes at $10 each. That's a pretty good fundraiser, is it not?
Well, $10 was worth a lot of money.
Yes, it was.
Huh. That was like 20 times 10. That could be like $2,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. Now, times 100,000, there'd be like $250,000 nowadays just to vote. I think, if I'm reading that right. Now, although Mr. McMillan did not wish to comment on the possibilities as who would be elected, he agreed when the question was put to him that there was a deciding feeling in favor of Mr. Ritchie. So it looks like
So he figured that Ritchie would get the position.
Yeah, and McMillan was his sidekick, Russell's sidekick.
Yeah.
So now J.F. Rutherford, one of the directors of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, which is incorporated in the state of Pennsylvania, has been mentioned as a possible candidate for the president of the society. But Mr. McMillan said that he doubted whether Mr. Rutherford would care to take the position. He is a resident of Los Angeles, California, and the work of his office would necessitate his moving to Brooklyn, which Mr. McMillan doubts he would care to do. He is at present time in Florida paying off Maria and Margaret. Who's Margaret?
I'm not sure.
His wife, maybe?
Yeah.
No, not yet. Maybe. Mr. Ritchie is being kept out of town, and his personal views in the matter were not directly learned. Mr. McMillan explained that under the provision of the Charter of Society, it became the duty of the board of directors to act in an executive capacity in the case of death of the president, who was Pastor Russell. There was no provision whereby the vice president became the executive head. The work of the society is now being conducted by the board of directors. To facilitate the work, they have appointed an executive committee answerable to the board, and this committee consists of Vice President Ritchie, Chairman, W.E. Van Amberg, Secretary and Treasurer, and J.F. Rutherford, Director. Director. That's a.
He was a director at the time.
You could have a bunch of directors.
Correct.
So Pastor Russell has been the only president of the society. Up to 3 years ago, he controlled the votes of the organization, owing to the fact that he was the largest contributor. He was stated by Mr. McMillan that Pastor had given $300,000 to the work during the past 30 years. However, the number of smaller contributors wiped out the pastor's control, and he did not
vote.
He did not voted at the elections, although he was reelected. At the present time, according to Mr. McMillan, there is no combination of votes large enough to control an election, and the outcome rests entirely with the voters at the annual meeting in Pittsburgh in January.
Interesting. So he's saying it was completely up for grabs at that point. Oh, look at this next title.
Coup at Watchtower World Headquarters unleashed.
Coup.
Oh, coup. Sorry.
By the end of this, you'll be saying that right.
Coup.
Yes.
The Brooklyn Daily Eagle, July 31st, 1917. Rustlite split, factions in fight to control society. Rutherford's enemies ousted, old followers of Pastor Russell expelled, and Bethel and Tabernacle under guard. Interesting.
So we've gone ahead, what's about 8 months now, and this is what's going on. Oh, 10 months. Here we go.
Okay. Is that what we are? After months of smoldering jealousy, trouble has broken out in full force among the followers of the late Pastor Russell. At the present time, the Bethel established by the founder Russellism at the Columbia Heights address, they call it the Tabernacle.
And the Tabernacle
Yeah.
at another location.
Oh, and the Tabernacle.
Yeah.
Okay, at Hick Street. Closely resemble armed camps, and two factions are engaged in a bitter fight to hold control of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, the Holden Corporation, in effect for the various business enterprises and associations Pastor Russell established.
Dun, dun, dun. Wow, here we go.
Guards are stationed at all the doors to various Russell's homes and offices in the Tabernacle. The guards have strict orders that the malcontents, those opposing Rutherford, are to be kept out. The little colony on Columbia Heights, which Pastor Russell founded 10 years ago, is fairly seething and bubbling with the accusations and recriminations of each faction is directing against the other.
Wow.
According to Judge Rutherford, the evil one is again trying to the evil one is again trying to disrupt the society. On his orders, some of the oldest followers of the late pastor have been expelled from the society, and the scheme of running the society's publications by an editorial board selected in Pastor Russell's will has been almost entirely upset. 4 directors of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, according to Judge Rutherford, have no right to sit in the councils. These 4 directors, among them Robert Hirsch, are credited with being the leaders of the one faction in the present bitter fight for control. And Judge Rutherford and A.H. McMillan credited with having brought about Rutherford's election as Pastor Russell's successor, or the leaders of the other. Okay, so McMillan is actually on Rutherford's side. It is under the orders of Rutherford and McMillan that every door of Bethel and the Tabernacle has its sister or brother constantly on hand doing security duty just now.
Or sentry duty. Same thing, pretty much. I believe it was during Russell's life that McMillan actually started flipping sides to Rutherford, if I remember. So yeah, there's no love lost there.
Enemies of Rutherford.
Okay, let's continue. The biblical authors had one common basis for writing as they did in code. The cryptic meanings were penned for the prophets themselves and their line of successors so as to perpetuate certain truths and facts relative to the ongoing struggle between the negative and positive forces prevailing on the planet. It was this code which, as we started, confounded the greatest scholars, since, as noted, they lacked the key. What made matters more confusing was the fact that in using the code, the writers were compelled many times to transgress the generally accepted laws of grammar. The advent of such a unique soul as Pastor Charles Taze Russell's in that turn of the century marked a change in biblical scholarship. He possessed the courage and boldness to differ with his contemporaries on fundamentals, and in this his devotees are justified in holding him as a prophet who saw first and foremost biblical prophecy fulfilling itself on the Jewish people. He recognized that century after century, age after age, scholars had labored on the study of the biblical style and idioms, but could not make any sense of them. He was aware of the fact that they all knew that they were dealing with a language which contained something mystic and hidden. What had confused them most was, 1, the prophet's constant interchange of the masculine and feminine genders when the subject related only to one or of the two. 2, their use of both plural and the singular for either a singular or plural subject. 3, their reference to the Creator's nature and essence in ways unacceptable to most people. 4, their attributing to themselves functions believed only possible to the Creator to fulfill. 5, their reference to the Creator in both the masculine and the feminine. 6, their allusion to Yahweh both in the plural and the singular at one time and separately. And 7, their constant shifting of speech from the first person to the second and the third, and then back again, the first, etc. This procedure employed all the Hebrew prophets and writers without any exceptions, was deliberately executed and had to do with the code they had in common. They embraced a rare unity concealed in the Hebrew name Yahweh. One fiery flame involved, one spirit moved each and every one of them. Hence the famous biblical proponent, Hear, O Israel, Yahweh, compound name, past, present, and future, Elohinu. Heron lay the key to the essence and personalities of the singular Hebrew prophets, liking them all into a unique unity and thus distinguishing them from those others outside the count. It may now be understood why each and every one of them in speech or in writing employed such terms as thus hath said Yahweh, etc. And one may ask, who would dare to declare unless the absolute authority was there? 1 or 2,000 years may have elapsed between one prophet and another, for example, the long span between Moses and Isaiah, or between Ezekiel and Malachi, yet they had one thing in common, the code so evident in their style and uses of words. Pastor Charles Taze Russell appeared in the turn of the century as a witness to prophecy and fulfillment. He envisioned the events which his century would bring upon nations and the planet as a whole based upon his understanding of the biblical prophecies, which he kept interpreting and proclaiming to the world. And as we stated, he saw Israel as the Creator's timepiece and the Jewish people's return to their ancient homeland as a sign of fulfillment. And this injunction was to stop, look, and listen. All messages to all current Watchtower members. It would be in wisdom and in the spirit of biblical truth that you stop, look, and listen, and heed the call of your first president and the original editor of the Watchtower, Pastor Charles Taze Russell, whose successors after his passing changed the course of the prophetic teachings in violation of what the Bible proclaims. Yahweh's word is return, and I will return unto you. There's but one road to this return, to the law and to the testimony. Okay, now we're on chapter 1. Skeptics' early quest for truth. The following material about the early days of Charles Taze Russell appear in the Watchtower magazine of January 1st, 1912. Charles Taze's second son, Joseph L. and Anna Eliza Burney Russell, who was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1852. At a very young age, the Russell children began to receive their first impression on religion, some of which have been shattered, notably those relating to the supposed literal lake of fire as a place of eternal torment for the unsaved. The strong resemblance between the portraits of Pastor Russell at 60 and Charles Taze at 3 is unusual, and the character lines indicating determination rather suggest the explanation of this subsequent independent evangelistic work. Up to the age of 15, he believed as gospel truth all and only such doctrines as his sectarian minister had taught him. To learn to understand doctrines at that point was very difficult, as the clergy usually discouraged individual Bible research, and asking of questions on doctrines was then considered equivalent to doubting, and to doubt was to be damned. The dissipation of the superstition, reverence, and fear only awaited such time as he should attempt to defend by the scripture his particular sectarian views, and subsequent events justifying the thought that Providence had decreed that just as this juncture, young Russell should attempt to reclaim an infidel's acquaintance to Christianity. By skillful questions which were unanswered by either minister or layman from their sectarian standpoints, and by the maneuvering of many seemingly paradoxical scriptures, the infidel completely rooted young Russell, who within a few months became an admitted skeptic. Here, as in nearly every similar case, the Bible was discarded together with doctrines of the creed. Few indeed, under such circumstances, studied the scriptures to see whether they had been properly interpreted, and Charles Taze Russell was no exception. As he desired to learn the truth regarding the hereafter, the next few years were devoted to the investigation of the claims of the leading Oriental religions, all of which he found to be unworthy of credence. Hence, we see him arriving at manhood's estate with a mind unsatisfied, a mind which, despite all efforts to the contrary, was still subject to its occasional bad hours on account of his first impression of the eternal torment theory. At 21, Mr. Russell was possessed of much knowledge and voluminous data on religion as believed in and practiced in all parts of the world. Apparently, these were to become the no value to himself or others because of large business responsibilities that were placed on him at this time. Days grew into weeks and weeks into months and found less and less time to devote to theological research, and the solace for heart and head so diligently sought for seemed as remote to him. Okay, let's continue.
Evicted.
Right on.
Let one of those suspected of working against Judge Rutherford go out into the street, and his personal belongings are at once packed up and sent after him. On his return, he finds that the door is barred, and he is told that the Bethel can be his home no longer. Because of his state of affairs, 4 members of the society are now barred in their rooms at Bethel. They have told the Rutherford followers that only physical force can put them out, and the Rutherfordites, they called them the Rutherfordites, are hesitating to resort to this. Thus far, physical violence has been threatened only once in the row. This came about a week ago when Judge Rutherford directed the Reverend Macmillan that the 4 directors of the Watchtower Society should not be permitted to enter the society's offices in the tabernacle. The 4 directors insisted on their right to enter, and Macmillan held them off forcibly, at the same time directing a small boy to run for a policeman. When the officer arrived, Macmillan said something about kicking his ministerial brethren into the street, but the policeman failed to back him up, and a verbal battle alone resulted. Judge Rutherford was asked today to explain the causes back of this row, but said that he had no statement to make. That serious trouble had existed in the society for several days, was, however, admitted by Mrs. Hidgins. How did you say that?
I think I'd say Hudgens.
Hudgens, who said that she was Judge Rutherford's secretary, but who was classed by Judge as one of his 3 stenographers. Stenographers.
Yeah.
All the differences have been amicably adjusted, was Mr. Hudgens' words. Trouble dates back to Pastor's death. The present disturbance dates back to the time of Pastor Russell's death last fall. Ever since his death, bickerings and rivalries as to who should occupy the chief council seats have been in progress. A deadlock developed among the ministers of the sect over which of them have the honor of delivering the eulogies at Russell's funeral. Some speakers, after having been selected and notified of their appointment, were not permitted to go upon the platform. Beginning at that time, the present dominant faction grew up in the society under the leadership of Mr. Reverend Macmillan. It developed later that he was secretly working in the interests of Judge Rutherford, and where it has been generally accepted that A.I. Ritchie, Vice President of the Watchtower Society, would succeed Pastor Russell as President of the Society. At the annual meeting, the judge was found to have been elected. His election was announced as unanimous, and there was surprise among certain members of the society when it was later determined that a number of people had voted against him.
Oh, so how can you have a unanimous winning if people voted against you?
Well, it goes on to say Judge Rutherford gained his title as a probate judge in Western State. Wrong, it says. For several years before Pastor Russell's death, he acted as the founder's legal advisor. The character of the Watchtower Society provided for a president, a vice president, and a board of directors to govern all the rest, and Judge Rutherford pronounced it all legal. Now it is charged that he refuses to recognize his formal legal opinion and also refuses to accept legality of the papers which he formally passed upon. Judge Rutherford holds that the People's Pulpit Association, or one of the associations of this name, is the supreme body in Russellism. So he kind of flipped it on them.
Well, papers that he actually ruled as legal before, he's now saying they're not.
And he was never a judge, but that was just a title they gave him.
Mhm.
So among the other factors that are now said to be creating unrest in the society is the questioning of the prophecies of the late founder.
Mhm.
Many years ago, Pastor Russell devised a unique program, which he named the Divine Plan. Connected with this, there was a chronology so arranged that the great prophecies of Daniel and Jeremy were due to begin their fulfillment not later than 1910.
Hey, are you so close to Jeremiah that you can just call him Jeremy?
Oh, did I say that wrong?
Daniel and Jeremiah.
Thank you, hon.
Unless you're really close, then it's Jeremy.
It's a good thing we have you on this channel.
Good thing I'm watching today.
To this he held unswervingly, and to this he held unswervingly until about 1908. So they were talking about he figured it should happen in 1910 at the end, right?
And then
So-
he believed that up until 1908.
When asked about prophetic matters after that date, he felt less and less certain. And at the time of his death, he answered, I don't know.
Wow.
People asked him.
Yeah.
To the three very important and vital questions affecting the well-being of the sect he had founded. The facts connected with this are just coming out in the society and are affording one of the bases for unrest. Also, that's today, really. Eh? Also, it has been learned that funds are not coming in with the readiness that was formerly one of the chief glories of the Russellism. Worry about finances, many of Pastor Russell's followers believe, had much to do with his sudden death. Wonder why.
Well, they're just saying that Russell probably, one of the reasons he was so stressed and died was because of the finances, right? As he died on his way back from his gold mine.
But he had 2.3 million in today's cash in his safe.
Wouldn't you be stressed about who was going to find that if you weren't
And his
there?
wife wanted $40 a month.
I know. He couldn't afford that.
Well,
All right.
it really opens our eyes as to who the founder of this religion is. Now, the next one is Brooklyn Bethel captured. Now we get close. The Brooklyn Daily Edge, September 5th, 1917. You see, you'd never get this out of the Watchtower.
Yeah. And just so you know, when he says edge, he means eagle. It's the Brooklyn Daily Eagle.
Oh, sorry. It's a newspaper in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, from 1917.
From
Okay.
1917.
Here we go
So
again.
the title of it is Rutherford Ousted 4 Directors, Elected for Life by Pastor Russell. They're forced out by new leader, Rutherford in control.
So Rutherford, they're saying that Rutherford was elected for life by Russell.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay,
here we
let's
go.
read the article. Following months of factional disturbances within the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, the unusual religious sect founded by the late Pastor Russell has restored peace among its members. It was learned today by the simple expedient of expelling all those who were opposed to the authority of its new head, Joseph F. Rutherford. 4 of the big men in the Council of the Bethel at Columbia Heights have recently been forced out with their families. It meant that about 30 persons, all told, were compelled to leave the sanctuary provided for them by late pastor. The 4 leaders were members of the board of directors of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, and supposedly should have held office for life in guiding the affairs of what used to be Russellism. See, even the papers back then knew that. The laws of the Russellites and the express direction of the late pastor stipulated that the directors were elected for life and could only be removed by a 2/3 vote of all the shareholders in the society. Despite this, President Rutherford, the successor to Pastor Russell, instituted a vigorous campaign against the authority of the 4 directors concerned. They were A.I. Ritchie, vice president of the society, and mentioned last fall as a probable successor of the pastor. And then there's R.H. Hirsch, a member of the editorial committee of the Watchtower, and then there was J.D. Wright and I.F. Hoskins.
So all 4 of those gentlemen were gone.
Each of the 4 were immensely powerful in the affairs of the society and was thoroughly conversant with some of its innermost secrets. And it is understood that this was the reason for the drive against them made by the new pastor, Judge Rutherford. For a time, the four were able to make a stand against the attacks of the President Rutherford. They gained a number of the adherents among the Watchtower members in the Bethel on Columbia Heights and the Tabernacle at Hicks Street, and took on the aspect of an armed camps. The four alleged malcontents on the one hand, so there was the four malcontents.
They were not happy. Malcontent literally means unhappy.
And the Rutherford and his adherents on the other issued a number of circular letters and booklets reciting a history of case, but the legal acumen that the new president finally won the victory. His ground for expelling the four men was that the board of directors had been illegally constituted under its character.
Under its charter.
Under its charter.
The charter that he previously approved. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society is a Pennsylvania corporation and was established as such by Pastor Russell under the advice of Rutherford. So he did all the legal stuff.
Yeah, so he knew exactly how to counter it, I guess.
He built it. He built it in, I think.
And then he tore it apart.
He built it so he could tear it apart. Interesting. But after the death of the founder, his successors asserted that it was impossible for the Pennsylvania Corporation to elect directors for life in New York State and to be self-perpetuating as the charter provided. Although eminent legal advice was obtained by the four directors as to the property of their positions in the board of directors, Rutherford and those associated with him adopted steamroller methods, and the four directors were, by resolution of three other directors, notified that they had been removed. This was late in July. I guess it's kind of illegal.
Oh, absolutely. And what he's saying is what's legal in Pennsylvania isn't necessarily legal in New York.
Interesting. The four still held on at the Bethel, however. Those four guys.
Yeah.
However, Rutherford had those with him, could not get the four to leave. So that finally, a guard was set with the instructions to bar any of the four from re-entering the Bethel should he leave to get supplies. A sort of cat and mouse game went on for several weeks at the Bethel, as the four had been informed by the sympathizers of the plans of the Rutherford followers, and therefore so arranged matters so they could guard the entrances and exits of one of their numbers who was daily delegated to go for food. They played this game until 2 weeks ago, but then some sort of compromise was reached, the nature of it being kept a close secret, by which the four agreed to leave.
They were bought out.
They were ousted, bag and baggage, with all the members of their families, and peace once more descended on Bethel. According to some members of the society, this is not a permanent peace, however. There is said to be still a measure of opposition to the tactics of Rutherford and those conversant with the affairs of the society. Asserted is because the new president is breaking away from many of the tenets of the late Pastor Russell. Instead of Russellites, it is said that the members of the new sect are recognizing themselves as Rutherfordites. Never see that in a Watchtower. In line with this idea, it has been learned that the traveling lectures employed by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society have received new and rigid instructions direct from President Rutherford. These instructions provided that they must, in all their teachings, emphasize the rule of implicit obedience to Rutherford. Any opposition to him, it has been stated, no matter of what kind, is to result in their instant expulsion of the offender from the Watchtower Society. So he had a disfellowshipping program.
Yeah, but this isn't for members.
Oh,
Remember,
this is the legal guys.
This is still like the governing, well, the first, or I guess the
10,000 voters.
Yes.
Or 100,000 voters?
Pretty much. If you wanted to be a shareholder, if you were a director, held any kind of position and and spoke against him, you were gone.
It's kind of like the governing body today.
Oh yeah. Well, you can see where their policies started coming from. Anyways, okay, here we go.
The next newspaper article, I'm going to get this right, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle.
Nice.
January 10th, 1918.
And it says,
go ahead.
General Rutherford completes coup. Brooklyn Tabernacle captured.
7th volume foes crushed at rally of Russellites.
Yeah.
There's another article.
Well, all opposed to Judge Rutherford were defeated in the election of elders and deacons. That's quite the church term. Huh.
I'm
Interesting.
just pulling up finished mystery book.
Anyway,
We'll let that pull up.
Yeah.
All opposed to Judge Rutherford defeated in election of elders and deacons. That's what they called them.
well, yeah, but I know deacons from
Catholic.
well, or just other church systems, Anglicans.
They
I don't
use
know
them
the
today.
Catholic of deacons. Sorry, we have bishops, or they have bishops and archbishops, but that's
maybe they
definitely
changed
church.
So elders and deacons, that'd be like circuit overseers, maybe.
No, well, yeah, perhaps we'll find out.
Judge Rutherford, Judge, they go in quotes. They go like their fingers, you know.
Air
Judge.
quotes, judge.
Air quote, yeah.
Yeah.
Joseph F. Rutherford demonstrated efficient leadership last night at the meeting in Brooklyn of the followers of the late Pastor Russell to elect elders, deacons, and other officers for the local congregation. The meeting was held at the Brooklyn Tabernacle. Not one of those members who were opposed to Judge Rutherford made any headway. Each time a member tentatively arose after his nomination as an elder or deacon to say that he was opposed to the 7th volume, a barrage of machine gun fire was turned on him from the platform by Brother Rutherford, who would say, "Under the circumstances, it will not be necessary to vote for you, but we will take a vote anyway." And then after the member had been swept to pieces, Brother Rutherford would run the tank over by him by adding, "The brother is not elected," or "the brother only got 4 votes," as the case might be. Early in the meeting, A.I. Ritchie, one of the directors of the Watchtower, ousted by Rutherford, opposed a motion that had been made to require the elders and deacons nominated to answer 3 questions affirmatively. The last and apparently most important of the 3 was whether the nominee would accept and teach the 7th volume. What's the 7th volume?
I don't know.
Mr. Ritchie protested that this was not in accordance with the rules laid down by the late Pastor Russell as one of the requirements for the servants of the church to carry on the harvest, and inadvertently mentioned something about disposed brothers.
Deposed brothers.
Yeah. So here's Rutherford. "I'm not going to listen to any more references to disposed brothers." Deposed brothers, interrupted Rutherford. "No one has been deposed." Mr. Ritchie subsided. The original list of candidates for the position of elders numbered 73 men, all of them selected by the old board of the elders and deacons. As Rutherford read the names one by one, the candidates stood up and answered 3 questions specified in the resolution. Every candidate answered yes to the first 2, and the third question, "Are you willing to teach the 7th volume or the finished mystery?" Oh, it's the finished mystery book.
Okay.
And
No, it's
Rutherford
or.
finished writing it.
So what they're saying is, are you going to teach one or the other, either the 7th volume or Rutherford's new finished mystery? Yeah, and that
Okay.
was the rock upon which the opposition to Rutherford split. Yeah.
So Rutherford finished that finished mystery
Yeah.
book, remember?
Yeah.
We haven't gone into that, or we didn't go in that direction
Not yet.
But anyways, that finished mystery book put him in jail.
Yeah.
So a dozen or more insurgents among them, longtime Charles Taze Russell's associates, was A.I. Ritchie, J.D. Wright, 2 of the authors of the pamphlet attacking Rutherford's financial methods, declared that they could not accept the 7th volume as genuine. By the term of the resolution, this statement automatically eliminated them as candidates. Rutherford gathered assurance after the first 2 or 3 of his opponents had been weeded out within the disturbance. Without disturbance. He declared that, though it was contrary to the resolution, he would put their names to the vote anyway.
So once he was confident that his opponents were going to lose, he actually would,
let him vote.
Yeah, it gave him more confidence, exactly.
The result completely justified his confidence. Whenever a candidate even hesitated over the question about the 7th volume, so the 7th volume must be what Rutherford wanted it to say. I thought it was called the finished mystery. Well, anyways, whenever a candidate even hesitated over the question about the seventh volume, the show of hands in favor of him was well under a dozen.
So,
Contrary minded by the same sign Rutherford said, the whole auditorium rustled as nearly every hand was thrust in the air. Rutherford smiled and called the next name. So the seventh volume, Russell wrote these volumes, and there was a seventh volume, and then Rutherford changed it to the Finished Mystery. So this was all about voting for the seventh volume or the Finished Mystery book. That's what I see happening here. But they
Okay, let's continue. The question that here confronted him was, shall I try longer to find the truth on religion, or shall I smother the hope of finding it and strive for fame and fortune among the financial and commercial captains of the time? The latter he was about to do, but he decided first to search the scriptures from a skeptical standpoint for its own answer on hellfire and brimstone. Amazed at the harmonious testimony proving an unexpected but satisfactory answer, he understood systematic Bible research and was brought to a complete confidence in the Bible as being inspired by an all-wise, powerful, just, and loving Creator, worthy of adoration and worship. Thus, a sure anchor for a fainting hope was found, and an honest, truth-seeking heart was made glad. The following material, taken from the writings of one of his students, gives detail about Pastor Russell's later career. He was president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society from its organization in 1884 until his death. He was also president of the People's Pulpit Association, organized in 1909, and the International Bible Students Association, incorporated in London in 1913. Through these religious corporations, as well as by word of mouth, he promulgated the gospel of the Messiah's kingdom. He was the author of several books and booklet publications issued at intervals between the year 1881 and 1914, most notable among which is his series of studies in the scripture. The aggregate circulation of his books and booklets alone is upward of 16 million copies in 35 different languages. He organized and conducted a lecture bureau which constantly employed 70 Bible lecturers who traveled and delivered lectures on the scriptures. Each year he wrote practically all the copy for the Bible Students Monthly, the annual distribution of which amounted to approximately 50 million copies. His weekly sermons were handed by a newspaper syndicate. More than 2,000 newspapers with a combined circulation of 15 million readers at one time published his discourses. All told, more than 4,000 newspapers published these sermons. Pastor Russell was not the founder of a new religion and never made such a claim. Indeed, he made no claim of a special revelation from God, but held that it was God's due time for the Bible to be understood. He was the sole editor of the Watchtower from 1879 until his death on October 31st, 1916. Subsequent issues of his date under new editorial leadership have violated the principles established by Russell, especially those relating to the prophecies respecting Israel's return to Zion. Okay, chapter 2. Jewish Yearbook recounts Russell's pro-Zionist stance. The Herzl Yearbook, Volume 5, published by the Herzl Press in 1963, contains a comprehensive article entitled Jehovah's Witnesses and Their Attitude Toward Judaism and the Idea of the Return of Zion, authored by Yonah Malaki, a member of Israel's First Ministry of Religious Affairs. It describes in detail the historic role of the late Pastor Charles Hayes Russell played in advocating the return of the Jewish people to the land of their ancestors on the basis of biblical prophecy. It also notes how, after his death, his successors had betrayed him by completely reversing his pro-Zionist prophetic pronouncements. Following are some of the highlights of Herzl's yearbook article. In this article, we intend to describe a unique Adventist sect in whose ranks we witness a very understanding process in the development of its attitude to Judaism. We will show how an originally positive and sympathetic attitude towards Zionism and the Jewish return to Zion on the part of the leadership of the sect changed and turned, at times went on, into a negative one until it became hostile towards the very existence of the state of Israel. We are referring to the religious sect established in 1870 by Charles Hayes Russell, a young businessman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who was born in 1852. The name of the sect was changed several times in the course of the years. In 1931, the sect assumed its present name, Jehovah's Witnesses. In his childhood, Russell belonged to the Congregational Church and was educated according to Presbyterian doctrine. But the pessimistic Calvinistic faith, with its belief in man being cursed from birth, was too frightening for the deeply religious young man. In his gropings for a new faith which would better suit his mentality and in his search for the biblical truth, Russell was influenced by the Adventist movement, which had emerged at the beginning of the 19th century and was headed by William Miller. Miller prophesied in 1816 that Jesus would return in the flesh and that his second advent would begin in 1844 when God's kingdom would be established on earth for a millennium. However, in 1844, nothing happened which would have testified to the beginning of salvation or the realization of the vision of the end of days. This disappointment among Miller's followers was very great. But despite this, they did not give up their belief in the imminent advent and their hope that the millennium would come into the not too distant future. In fact, various Adventist sects continue to grow and develop throughout the United States. Russell himself was one of those men who were engaged in calculating the end. He delved into the Holy Scriptures in order to find the hidden secrets of the prophets' visions. He found a biblical study circle and lectured to its members of the meaning of biblical prophecies. In 1874, he invested part of his fortune into publishing the first of this brochure entitled The Object and Manner of the Lord's Return, in which he revealed God's plan for humanity and described the purpose and circumstances of God's Son's return to earth. In 1876, when he was 24, Russell was elected pastor by the Bible study circle, which he headed. Somebody added God's Son return to earth. The purpose and circumstances of God's return to earth is what he wrote. In 1876, when he was 24, Russell was elected pastor by the Bible study circle, which he headed. In 1877, Russell published a treatise entitled Three Worlds, or A Plan of Redemption, in which he gave for the first time the exact date for the beginning of the kingdom of God, the year 1914. Also in 1877 began the astounding development of the sect, which called itself by different names such as Russellites, Bible students, Millennial Drawn People, etc. In 1881, on the day when the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society was founded by Russell, 1,200,000 leaflets were sent out all over the United States and the United Kingdom containing the religious doctrines of the Bible students. The young pastor developed his basic theological ideas in a series of 6 books which were published between 1886 and 1904. They were originally titled Millennium Dawn Series, but in 1904 the title was changed to The Studies in the Scriptures. In order to better understand the history of the sect, its characters, and its attitude towards the people and religions, it is necessary to sketch briefly Russell's theology as expounded in scores of books and brochures, which he continued to publish until the end of his death. A basic assumption in Russell's belief system was that the scriptures contain the secret of God's plan with regard to humankind, and that the secret can be penetrated by a proper understanding of the Holy Writ. Russell considered himself destined to interpret the hidden truth of the Bible with the help of divine inspiration. He therefore undertook to reveal the truths of God's intentions in dealing with humanity, the past and present of the future, by means of different computations and calculations, the original interpretation of the Old and New Testament. He created a unique theology which shed new light on the history of humanity. When Jehovah created the world, says Russell, it was his intention to establish in it an eternal paradise for mankind on the condition that man would obey his commandments. The role of watching over the human beings was entrusted to one of the angels, Lucifer, but Lucifer rebelled against his creator, and in his selfishness and lust for power, he led Adam and Eve astray. For a better understanding of Russell's approach to Judaism and the return of Zion, it is important to learn about the place of the Jewish people in his Adventist theology and the calculations he made in connection with that. Okay. Let's watch.
You all voted for Rutherford. Of course, if you didn't, you'd get ousted, right? So it says here, Rutherford smiled and called the next name. The election of the elders took more than an hour and a half, and so many extra names were proposed from the floor that Rutherford cautioned the congregation lest there be nobody left to elect as deacons. The roster of elders elected was 100% for Rutherford and the 7th volume. Okay, so Rutherford did call it the 7th volume. Less interest was taken in the election of the deacons because of the fact that they have relatively little power in the organization. As with the elders, however, the opposition was weeded out by the question regarding the 7th disputed volume of the Russell publications. When the business of the meeting had been finished, Rutherford made a plea for harmony in the organization. One nominee said, "I am not sufficiently satisfied that the 7th volume is scripture." "You are clearly out of order," interrupted Brother Rutherford. The nominee refused to stop speaking. "Will the brother please be in order?" insisted Brother Rutherford. "That shows that you have not the proper qualifications for an elder, for you can't be in order." "Thank you," sarcastically replied the nominee. He was not elected. Comments of others who were not elected were, B.D. Cook, "My judgment leads me to believe that the book is not scripture."
Ooh, that got him out.
Mr. Ritchie, "I do not recognize the book as one Pastor Russell told us to expect."
And he would have known.
Yeah, G. Wiley, "I have already expressed my protest."
Gone.
William Hollister,
Hollister.
"I could teach parts of the book and could just as conscientiously point out errors." Huh.
Yeah.
So Rutherford didn't like those.
And then look, all these guys withdrew their names.
So J. Perrell, D. Cahoon, and J. Barry withdrew their names.
Huh.
F. G. Mason also refused to accept 7th volume of B.F. Mitchell. Brother Rutherford said, "This brother has expressed himself entirely out of harmony with the truth."
Oh, there it is, the truth.
Yeah. In his closing address, and evidence that he simply had been imitating what he had learned years earlier during Democratic political party conventions, Brother Rutherford said, "The time has come to forget our differences. We should be a help and a blessing to each other. When the majority speaks in a decided manner, we ought to take that as the Lord's will. If I have done anyone an injury, I humbly and publicly apologize. I have no feeling against anyone and love everybody." Sounds like a politician.
Mm-hmm.
"We should have no other view than to hold fast to what the Lord has given us and not lose," and he'd drag it out, "not lose what we have." That's how he talked.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for that. So Mr. Ritchie, when he was asked whether he would take legal action to enforce the demands that the ousted directors have made on Brother Rutherford, naively replied, "The matter is in the Lord's hands." He said the same thing, "and we feel that he will settle it in his own way and own time better than the courts could do."
Wow.
See, that's what they say today.
Yeah.
Judge Rutherford refused to comment on the criticism of his management of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, issued a pamphlet form, over the signatures of former directors. And it says, "I am not going to dignify them by discussing them. They are wholly irresponsible," he said. "Any irresponsible person can make an allegation. I won't talk about them at all." So when the statement that the finances of the society had not been audited was related, he called for a number of the Watchtower containing the annual financial report. And it says here in quotations, "You will see that we had an auditing committee of experts." Yes, the same ignorant yes man as above.
He had yes men all
Yeah.
around him. Yeah. Okay.
So then it goes on. Joe Rutherford's past experience with rigid local intra-party elections also rigging
Yeah.
local inter-party elections also came in handy in the 1920s when Rutherford decided to reorganize the Watchtower's branch office in Germany. After traveling to Germany, Rutherford called a meeting of 10-7 German pilgrims to supposedly allow them to nominate and elect a new branch manager of their own choosing. Of course, Boss Rutherford had no real intention of allowing anyone to be the German branch manager except for the person whom Rutherford had already decided on. Pilgrims Bernard,
Buchholz,
how do you say that?
Buchholz,
Okay, and Paul
Balzerit,
Rutherford's choice were nominated. Rutherford had the 7 German pilgrims cast secret ballots. Rutherford then counted the ballots himself and announced that Paul Belzertz won nearly unanimously by the vote of 6-1, making it appear that Paul Belzert also was Jehovah's choice. Joe Rutherford had to assume that Bernard
Buchholz would vote for himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Days later, when the German pilgrims began talking amongst themselves, the other 5 German pilgrims discovered that each of them had voted for
Buchholz.
Bernard.
Yeah,
It all came out.
wow.
So Bernard Buchholz actually was the winner of the election, either by a vote of 5-2 or 6-1. None had the courage to confront Rutherford.
Wow.
I can't believe this.
Here we go.
Okay, this is another subheading. To the victors belong the spoils. As with any mafia organization, when there is a change in leadership, the captain and soldiers do not inherit the assets which they held in secret partnership with the former boss. The former boss's share goes to the new boss, and best as he can discover and figured such out. In the case of the Soda Lake gold mining operation described above, and that was in our last episode, we talked about that. As soon as Judge Rutherford was elected president in early January 1917, and as soon as he had things somewhat situated at the Watchtower headquarters, Rutherford headed to California in mid-February 1917. There, Rutherford set in motion the legalities to take over Charles Taze Russell's interests at the Soda Lake gold mine. Rutherford thereafter scurried back to the Watchtower headquarters in early March 1917. Frankly, we were not only surprised but shocked when we found that Judge Rutherford had put his personal name on this and then still mostly secret business operations. How many of you 21st century readers knew about the Soda Lake operation before you read about it here, or from one of the 4 multiple earlier disclosures over the past decade? Apparently, there was something going on with either Cole and or White such that Judge Rutherford needed to remove them from the picture. Neither did Rutherford trust Kewen and others enough to leave Rutherford's interests legally undocumented. Ernest Kewen was left behind not only to oversee the windup of the 1916 to 1917 mining season at Soda Lake and preparations for the upcoming 1917 to 1918 mining season, but also to oversee the operations of the Mena Film Company. In fact, Ernest Kewen, whose background was in agricultural seeds in Ohio, spent a large portion of 1917 in California overseeing both businesses. 1917 was an extremely hectic year at the Mena Film Studio, with the shooting and production of Restitution, and no expense was spared. So that was a movie they were shooting?
Yeah, it looks like they were already into studios at that point.
I think there is another section on all the businesses
Oh, yeah.
we haven't covered yet. Okay, well, let's carry on. Researchers will note that Charles Taze Russell's name was never officially listed amongst the corporation owners of the Mena Film Company, Inc., or the Pyramid Film Company, Inc., nor their distribution affiliates, Perfection Advertising Company, and other yet to be discovered companies. However, anyone who believes that Charles Taze Russell did not have his fingers in those highly desirable pies are simply naive, dishonest, or both, as is anyone who believes that Judge Rutherford did not inherit Russell's secret interests in those operations. Pastor Russell's micromanaged everything having to do with the production of the photodrama of creation, and Russell thoroughly enjoyed this newfangled movie business. There is no way that Russell didn't have a financial interest in his drama's offspring. In 1912, Pastor Russell quietly made a significant real estate purchase in Manhattan, near Broadway at Central Park. On 63rd Street, the builder of a large new 3-story theater had gotten himself into financial troubles and was forced to sell the partially completed property. Does that sound familiar? Hammondville. That property became Russell's New York City temple, where religious services were conducted along with multiple daily showings of photodramas starting in January 1914. What received little or no publicity from Pastor Russell was the fact that Russell also purchased the adjacent 10-story mixed occupancy former hotel building, which was rented out as apartments, offices, and retail space. Typically, there were multiple transactions before the property was finally transferred into the hands of the People's Pulpit Association in November of 1913. As all of the PPA's properties, these two new properties also were fully encumbered with full mortgages to retain all financial power within Russell's hands via his total control of the Watchtower Society.
So he was really diversified.
Yeah. An article in the Watchtower magazine, which did not mention the purchase of the adjacent buildings, boasted that the theater building was worth nearly $500,000. Actually, in 1915, the assessed value of the theater building was $220 million.
No.
That's what it says.
No, it does not.
No, 220,000.
That is correct.
Oh, so okay, so they're boasting that it was worth nearly $500,000.
But it was worth half that.
But it was assessed value was 220,000, and the assessed value of the former hotel was only 105,000. Those two large Manhattan properties were cashed out by Judge Rutherford after Russell's death in 1917 for 330,000, roughly $6.2 million.
Yep. In 2016 dollars.
Yeah, in 2016 dollars.
Wow.
So he pulled in a lot of cash just with those two buildings.
Mm-hmm.
As outlined in our Charles Taze Russell financial biography, Russell's main real estate straw man's buyer-seller, George Raymond, continued buying and selling real estate investment properties in and around Pittsburgh after Judge Rutherford became president in 1917. In fact, in the mid-1917, Rutherford apparently approved plans to subdivide into 77 one-acre lots the balance of the United Cemeteries, property not already designated for cemetery purpose. Just as advertising was being readied for such, Northside Catholic Cemetery stepped in and offered to purchase the entire tract, which was accepted.
So they were already selling land back then.
To the Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
The next heading is, all Jehovah's Witnesses are equal. But some Jehovah's Witnesses are more equal than others.
Okay.
Let's see what this is about. Over the decades, the Watchtower cult has published hundreds of experiences glorifying the sacrifices of common Jehovah's Witnesses around the world who have gone to jail or prison rather than violate the written and unwritten dictates set forth by the leaders of the Watchtower cult. Going to jail or prison for the sake of beliefs and practices of the Watchtower cult has long been considered a noble act, even a privilege, by the vast majority of rank-and-file Jehovah's Witnesses. Over the decades, the Watchtower cult has reinforced this mindset in its followers by never missing an opportunity to repeat a varying length account of time when the Watchtower president, Joseph F. Rutherford, and 7 of his followers were privileged to have served nearly 9 months in the federal prison during 1918 to 1919. That's all they did, eh?
It was a privilege.
So it's a privilege for the brothers in Russia today to go to jail.
Absolutely, it's a privilege. Anyways.
Yeah. So keeping with the tradition of these two sisters' websites of peeling back the layers of the Watchtower history and discovering what is actually lying beneath the painted-on surface, we now ask this question. Just how anxious were Judge Rutherford and his crew to suffer for their beliefs? We discovered that just as is most of the Watchtower's cult self-reported history, the various attributions of bravery, faithfulness, loyalty, and other greatnesses heaped onto Judge Rutherford and his crew are typically mythological.
Mm-hmm.
Good word.
Made up.
When Judge Rutherford and his new crew were jailed at a time of conviction and thereafter shipped off to the federal prison, they had been convicted of federal crimes and they had no choice in matter. However, a segment of Rutherford's imprisonment story had been overlooked. There was a point in the prosecution of Rutherford and his crew when serving time in jail was actually optional, and Rutherford did not face up to such as a noble manner that has been portrayed over the decades by the Watchtower cult. When the federal marshals arrested Judge Rutherford and 5 other Bethelites at Brooklyn Bethel in May 1918, it's Woodworth, Fisher were later arrested at their homes in
Scranton.
They were quickly taken before a federal judge and arraigned. Arraigned. What does that mean? Like put in jail? Booked. All pleaded not guilty. Bail was set for $5,000 for each of the 4 corporate officers, with $2,500 set for Robinson and DeKeka, totaling $25,000. Did Rutherford and his crew nobly accept their fate and sing hymns on their way back to jail while they waited patiently for their family or friends to arrange bail for each of them?
Nope.
Heck no. Joe Rutherford immediately attempted to put up all the property which the Watchtower cult owned in Brooklyn for bail. However, the USDC refused to accept as collateral real estate legally titled in the name of the People's Pulpit Association Religious Corporation. So this People's Pulpit Association, was that
I think that's what Russell started,
Oh.
like when he was starting his legal venture.
It's kind of a
And Rutherford hadn't changed the ownership of those buildings, right?
Yeah.
So
So what would Joe Rutherford do had his failed attempt to post Jehovah's property as his bail given Joseph Rutherford time to rethink such all ill-conceived decisions? Would Joe Rutherford now decide to wait in jail until bail could be properly managed? Heck no. Fully experiencing his fiduciary responsibility as a corporate director and officer of a religious not-for-profit organization, Joe Rutherford right there and then decided to deed all of Jehovah's property located on Columbia Heights to an individual Brooklyn Bethelite named J.F. Stevenson.
wow.
Once the property no longer belonged to Jehovah, but legally belonged to a human, it was accepted as collateral for bail as Rutherford and his crew. All that legal maneuvering must have taken hours, but it accomplished what Rutherford hoped it would accomplish. Neither Rutherford nor his 5 crew members had to spend that night in jail. Interestingly, Judge Rutherford either lied to the USDC about the recorded and unrecorded mortgages mentioned in the section above, or Rutherford had removed those multiple mortgages from the People's Pulpit Association property by May 1918. Just for background's sake, J.F. Stevenson, who was then a 38-year-old Bethelite and occasional Watchtower pilgrim, was the son of a prosperous Washington, D.C. businessman who coincidentally was Freemason, as was his brother, business partner, J.F. Stevenson, was not the only Watchtower pilgrim with Freemason connections. Starting back in the 1890s, Charles Taze Russell had begun choosing Freemasons as Watchtower pilgrims and for other prominent positions. He was hiring them. Thereafter, Pastor Russell continued to add Freemasons to prominent positions in his non-sectarian religious organization. Not by coincidence, over the years, Masonic temples across the United States began to open up their doors to both occasional and regular meetings of non-sectarian International Bible Students Associations. Notably, in 1903, Pastor Russell presided over the funeral of a Pittsburgh area Bible student and well-to-do businessman who also was Freemason. The deceased Freemason brothers attempted the funeral en masse and are presumed to have conducted FM rituals, Freemason rituals at the funeral and interment. Russell received $1,000 over, and that's over $31,000 in the 2016 dollars. Wow. Most interesting is the first fact that Charles Taze Russell founded much support among Freemasons living in the greater Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Before long, meetings of the Washington, D.C. International Bible Students Association were being held regularly at the Washington, D.C. Masonic Temple, either on Sunday mornings and Sunday evenings, or on Sunday evenings and Thursday evenings. After a second new Masonic temple was constructed in Washington, D.C., probable one-time Freemasons and prominent Bible students, General William P. Hall and J.T.D. Piles, both accompanied Russell on his infamous world tour that visited the Great Pyramid in 1912, formed a new IBSA group to meet regularly in that new Masonic temple on Sunday morning for public services, while Sunday and Thursday evening IBSA sessions continued. And that's the Masonic sessions, I'm assuming?
International Bible Students
Oh,
Association.
So their sessions continued to be held regularly at the old Masonic temple. So they were really connected to the Masons. So
Well,
there's more to that than we think.
It sounds like Russell really kind of admired them.
Well, he hired them.
I know,
Yeah.
admired them, yeah.
So in January 1913, Charles Taze Russell was named pastor of this new Washington Temple congregation. In addition to himself regularly appearing to preach for the Washington Temple congregation, Pastor Russell also sent Washington, D.C. a steady stream of his most prominent speakers from the Watchtower headquarters in Brooklyn. Attendances reportedly ranged widely from 400 to 1,200 persons per session, probably depending on the local popularity of the visiting Watchtower headquarters dignitaries. After the great dignitary?
Yep.
Russell, right?
Yeah.
After the great disappointment of 1914, attendance fell off such that Washington, D.C. Bible students discontinued their public meeting at the new Masonic temple and returned to holding Sunday and Thursday meetings at the old Masonic temple. So that set them back, the 1914.
They kind of went underground again, yeah. After that didn't come true.
Caution to those researchers attempting to locate evidence that Charles Taze Russell became a Freeman at some point during his lifetime. First,
If such a thing did occur.
Okay, first, if such did occur, it happened later on in his lifetime when occurred Russell's 180-degree change of attitude regarding Freemason and Freemasonry, not early in his lifetime when Russell was openly anti-Freemasonry.
Masonry.
Second, if such did occur, Russell likely would have chosen to have been raised in a lodge which could guarantee secrecy, probably during one of his multiple trips to Scotland and not in the United States. And third, if such did occur, there's practically no chance that any record of such exists. There are public Freemasons, and then there are private Freemasons. There are no publicly accessible membership records of Freemasons or records of Freemasons who have never wanted their membership known outside of the Masonic circles. For instance, prior to the 21st century, the vast majority of attorneys throughout the United States, thus judges at every local, state, and federal level, were or are Freemasons. That legal judicial influence was abundantly exercised both inside and outside the courtroom. One thing that restrained the Freemasons' exercise of legal and judicial power from going nuclear was a large number of opposing attorneys and opposing litigants who were all Freemasons. We personally know of one ultimately sanctioned Freemason attorney who made the ultimate mistake of backstabbing his own client as a favor to opposing Freemason attorney and opposing Freemason litigant, without exercising due diligence in discovering his own client's relatives and even more influential Freemason connections. Wow. Naive are those persons who publicly state that Charles Taze Russell was never a Freemason simply because Pennsylvania Freemason officials sent them a letter stating that Russell was not a Freemason. We have made multiple similar inquiries of multiple persons whom we knew for certainty were Freemasons, even providing the names and dates of the lodges they attended, and we received the same no record response.
So they're not confirming
No.
or denying anything. That's all. So don't use that as a
Yeah.
silence means yes.
If you're on the internet and you see these things that come up and this Freemason said Russell was never one, that's just some JW trying to protect Russell's interest.
Could be.
Well, yeah.
But what I'm saying, or what they're saying there, is it's Masonic policy to not confirm or deny. So you can't. Yeah.
Now here's the fourth one. Ignorant and naive as those persons who believe that in the 21st century Freemasonry is no longer proactively maneuvering Freemasons into the position of highly authority in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the government of the United States. So that statement's just saying that the Freemasons
it's still
are all over.
Yeah, and it's still happening.
We know for a fact that unquestionably unqualified judges who are Freemasons have been elected and appointed to state and federal trial,
Appellate,
and Supreme Court levels around the United States within the past decade.
Huh.
When this editor was in college, he, she, or it discovered that the leaders and the older members of one of the largest leading frats on campus consisted of all Freemasons. After college and after entering the business world, this editor discovered several international businesses in which it was required for upwardly mobile employees to be Freemasons. In one state, Freemasons controlled the
JCs,
and the Lion Clubs by joining and electing only Freemasons to the other orgs, locals, and state leadership. Recently, Freemasons have nationwide made a move to control, wait for it, a major liberal legal organization best known by its four initials. Why do you think the major philosophy change over the past decade? I'm assuming that they already controlled the Democracy Party.
the Democrat
Party. They long to have controlled the Republicans. Their goal is to make certain that it does not matter whether they bet black, white, or red, and to make certain that I make the eyes cross of those readers who are mental midgets. This editor personally has visited on multiple occasions this U.S. HQ of the Big I. Can you read the rest of that? The Big I.
Yeah.
Even if it's fictional labeled, it is not even never used. The label may not exist, but so does everything for which the label stands. Oh, the New World Order
is no longer
coming. It's already here. It may be prophetic Antichrist. Simply have to wait to see.
So the Big I, we have to do some, this is out of the US, so we're not quite familiar with the Big I, that stuff. Got more research.
I'm just reading for you guys what's on the paper in front of me. Well, that brings that subject to a close.
Yeah, I think so.
It's amazing how once we start digging into these guys, we find out they were into everything.
Oh, yeah. And I don't even think we know the half of it yet.
I found it interesting, the involvement in the Freemasons, like during Russell's time, and how they were doing their presentation about their churches. I guess they were having their churches held at the Freemasons temple. And then his pilgrims were those guys out on bicycles delivering his papers. He hired them, and they were mostly Freemasons. So there was involvement, for sure, according to this history anyways.
Yeah, it seems so.
You know, so anyways, that brings an end to this program. Next time, we're going to cover, look what it looks like, a few of the business schisms. And then we're going to get into Rutherford's radio program. So stay tuned for next time, folks. And we will learn more about Rutherford.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us.
Okay, bye for now.
Okay, that was that. Talk to you guys later. Bye. Ciao. When I'm done applying to my house, can I go see it? Okay, it only takes me a few minutes to complete that. Okay. Okay, I'm done. I played about 7 or 8 of them. Oh, Chavo, stop. Stop being mean. Yo, Chavo, don't you dare. Don't you dare. To get rid of me? Yes. I know you. Start to get ready for the week that I'm not gonna be here at all. I can't hear you. Start to get ready for the week that I'm not gonna be here. Hey Siri, turn on fan. Hey Siri, turn off the fan. Not too much, but maybe just enough. Chamo, can you come put the stuff on my back? No! No! You're doing it on purpose. You're doing it on purpose. What? No! Don't you dare. Oh, whatever. Hey! Oh, no, oh. No! No, no, no. Up here, up here. Yeah. Ow.
This is dirty.
What's dirty?
Pyramidology. It's nothing but embarrassed. Oh, I already got it. Pyramid. Israel restored. Piazzi Smythe. Smythe. Israel's foretold. Pyramidology is here to stay. Just coming to see you.
But you don't dare. I have at least.
I I'm doing the bathroom.
Do you finish it?
No.
Obviously a Freemason. Mason. God. I found a book nobody has ever heard of before. Righteous eyes realism. Or is realism? Until then, old friend. Until then, old friend. Until then, oh Fred, to the mama. Calvinistic. Oh yeah, right, you wish. Oh yeah, right, you wish.
The Origin and Significance of the Great Pyramid by C. Stanley Wake.